Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So Matthew Zachary, healthcare advocate. That's what I'm going to call you today. Extreme healthcare advocate. How about that? Matthew Zachary, welcome to the show today.
I will allow it. Thank you, Matt.
You know, sarcasm to me is just like a warm blanket. So I think I'm going to feel good at the end of this podcast today. I think so.
You're going to love my mom.
I'd like to meet.
She did well.
Is that right? So you're the founder of an award-winning, it says not profit. I'm reading your bio. Called Stupid Cancer, which I do want to talk about. And then you're also the CEO and co-founder of OffScrip Health. And I want to talk about both of those today, but I obviously want to talk about anything you want to talk about as well, because I am certainly in alignment with we have to be our own best advocates when it comes to healthcare, right? Nobody's going to look out for your health like yourself, right? Or nobody has a vested interest like you do. Is that fair enough to say?
Typically, that is the case where you're, I don't know if you're R-rated here, but you're typically screwed in general by default in life, and you have to hope that chemistry, physics, and chaos are in your favor.
Yes. And so, you know, too often I've seen, as I was telling you in pre-show, I have a healthcare background. I'm not a physician. Thank goodness for anybody that would be my patient. But, you know, I do have healthcare facilities, senior care specifically. And you can really tell, people have better outcomes when they're engaged in their health. There's no other way to say it. It doesn't matter if they're taking meds, not taking. I mean, no matter what, if you're engaged in your health or in your care, you're typically always going to have better outcomes. If nothing else, it just reduces anxiety and stress of what's to come. Just understanding what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, everything's always in theory. I'm always on the underdog side of things in the sense that raised as a Jew, you typically have what I call like congenital chutzpah. You know, you're just born with this spunky, take no prisoners, you know, go fuck yourself perspective.
Right.
But not everyone has that. And is it fair to conflate that just be your own advocate is fair to a population of people that come from various different cultures and perspectives and attitudes and zip codes?
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know it's possible to be their own advocate. So who is their surrogate that could hopefully be there for that? No one's going to deny that being your own, standing up for yourself, knowing what's right for you. It's cloudy, but it's also very individualized, and it's specific to what's wrong with you as well.
Right, of course. And so your organizations typically, it sounds like, support people in that process. Like if I just found out I had cancer, there's information, there's community, there's access to resources so that I can start at least understanding how to be my own advocate. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think by 2022 parlance, I ran crisis nonprofits. But back, 19 years ago, they would just go, we're trying to help you not be alone and make your experience suck a lot less.
Right.
That was 2022. Right. Cancer loneliness and cancer back when we were victims and all these other, sort of stoic antediluvian ways of thinking about quality of life.
Got it. Okay. And so is that what Stupid Cancer is? So tell me about Stupid Cancer and what exactly that is.
So I was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer in 1996. Spoiler alert, they were wrong. Best misdiagnosis ever.
And so literally you were misdiagnosed. You did not, they diagnosed you with cancer, but you didn't have cancer.
No, I actually had actual brain cancer, but they thought I'd be dead in 6 months.
Oh, gotcha. Got it. Okay.
No, there was some bad crap in my head, believe me or not. That was definitely there. Mm-hmm. It definitely needed surgery, definitely needed radiation.
Got it.
And I was 21. I was supposed to go to college, grad school, and I was a concert pianist. I was going to study with Hans Zimmer, and I had this whole future for myself. I might have been really happy back then because I didn't know what was wrong with me.
Right.
And then, life turns on a dime. All this crap happened. I couldn't go to grad school. I wound up rehabbing myself, playing piano over 5 years, but I fell into advertising as a plan B. And I worked in advertising for 10 years, but along the way, I finally met someone who had cancer in their 20s. Mm-hmm. Bonus was he also had brain cancer.
Oh, wow.
And he was bald and Jewish and went to my college.
You guys were twins somehow.
The nichest of niche markets.
Right.
But he's the one that kind of woke me up and asked me, how'd you like to be a cancer advocate? And I said, what the hell's a cancer advocate? Like,
Right.
no one put those words together back then. Like, advocate was like the gay advocate magazine was the 90s.
Gotcha.
That's all we knew. The HIV crisis. The Advocate was the magazine, and like there was no cancer advocates. It was the AIDS advocates.
Right.
And it was a whole different way to think about, you know, what could make my life, what could have made my life, my decisions, my empowerment, my experience better or less crappy. So that was kind of like my you know, man behind the curtain moment, where I got introduced to this, I don't know, this cottage industry of policymakers in DC, on which a board he sat of a very powerful lobby group. And that kind of sucked me into this whole, I can do more than just, you know, fix computers.
Right.
It's amazing. And I started to give piano concerts to cancer patients. I started getting involved with policy work. And eventually I realized that I wanted to start a nonprofit. Unbeknownst to me, you know, in hindsight, I should have maybe spent a little more time researching
studying
what that meant.
Yes.
But it was off the heels of your listeners, your viewers may remember the heyday of Livestrong, the Lance Armstrong.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, with the yellow,
you know,
yellow wristbands. And, yeah, right.
But what they stood for was the first time there was really ever like a quality of life, not a cure and research perspective on cancer. And that's what inspired me to start a nonprofit that was reflective of who I was, because I didn't see me in any of these other organizations at the time. I didn't see, I was saying non-athletic, fat, Jewish, white guys, but it was really more like Gen X.
Right.
It was really more like you're either for little kids, because no one wants babies with cancer, or you're for geezers. And all hail the geezers, they're great, but there was nothing in the middle that spoke to Gen X.
Right.
Millennials were like middle school back then. So this is really a Gen X thing.
Sure.
So Stupid Cancer was like the first Gen X cancer community that was ever formed around just being a specific age, not a specific type of cancer.
Got it.
And Steve Jobs has been a hero of mine. And one of his greatest quotes when he released the iPod 20 years ago, last year, was never give someone what they wanted. You give them what they never knew they needed.
Right.
And I created the organization I wished I had that wound up helping millions of people over the 14 years of my tenure there. And we took entrepreneurship, whatever. I built it in a way that listened to what Gen Xers wanted from the cancer support world that didn't exist. And honestly, the first thing they wanted was they wanted to go out to bars and be balled together drunk. You know, by today's standards, that maybe hasn't aged well as a behavioral tactic.
Right.
But that's what we needed. We needed the steam valve release.
Right.
Of not sitting in a circle, crying our tears out in a way that made us feel pitied and ugly.
Right.
And the first program of this organization was called the Stupid Cancer Happy Hour. And we just organized, like, back when meetup.com wasn't even a thing. This is pre-internet, just for context, like 07. And just listening to what the community really wanted from the first ever organization that took a national stance on, I mean, entitlement's a bad word. Everything's a bad word these days. You know, what do we deserve when shit happens to you that you didn't ask for when you're 22 or 30 or 35 or 17?
Right.
And just to wrap that up in a bun, what got me started behind the mic here is I had the first live radio show in healthcare in 2007 called The Stupid Cancer Show, which if you missed it, you missed it. Right, like how you had to wait 30 years to watch Friends again, you missed it. But that brought together such a huge audience that wanted to talk about their stories and say what their grievances are, and very Festivus like, you know, communities of aggrieved people that just wish this was a little better, and what could we do? That's the origin of starting Stupid Cancer. And it was an absolute, like, talk about happiness and joy. It was just the greatest gift to grow that organization to millions of people, to millions of listeners, to thousands of events and trade shows and road trips and all sorts of stunts and fabulous, like, just in your face, no pink ribbon crap, so authentic, so raw. And we got to pass legislation that helped millions of people. Like, it was my God,
Yeah.
what a difference
Right.
it was that this organization made. We had like 170 other partners. Still, we're not alone.
Right.
This was a massive shared community of organizations and policy groups and research groups and hospitals, and even some of the pharma companies and some of the retail companies were really invested in making cancer equitable for everyone. And at that time, that mostly meant Gen Xers.
Mm-hmm.
And the progress then revealed, oh, there's all these other people that we've been ignoring, and rightfully so. And now I stepped down, but they're verily, I think this is pre-tape, but either way, they're very dedicated to populations that have been marginalized and undermined for the last hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's become a real movement.
And so it still survives today post your exit, or did you exit completely, or just time for you to
I tore the bandage off. It was really important to exit the right way.
Yep.
Most people exit the wrong way.
Right.
Whether it's a nonprofit or a private sector company, it's very hard to exit the right way.
Mm-hmm.
We were very strategic about it. The new leadership took hold. Her name is Allison. She's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
She's running an incredible ship now. I'm volunteering for them, raising money for them.
Oh, nice.
And the legacy lives on. It's no longer who I am or what I do. It's the impact.
Right. Yep. And it's so cool that you were able to step out, and to your point, exiting, especially a for-profit, but I'm assuming a not-for-profit too. A lot of times there's ego in that, and there's identity in that. And to your point, a lot of times the exit doesn't go well because people are so wrapped up in it, and it's got to be my way because it's always been that way, right? And for something to evolve, you gotta, if you want it to be healthy, a lot of times you got to get out of the way, right? Get out of the way of the growth of the organization, no matter what kind of organization it is. When it's when it's that season and that time. So you went from there to then starting OffScrip Health, or was that already going at that point?
Well, I took a sabbatical. I exited January 2019.
Okay, got it.
And I took a year off.
Good for you.
To figure out what to do with myself.
Yeah.
At the time, I was getting speaking engagements and playing piano and giving concerts, and that was kind of like the living I was making. Mm-hmm. But the one chunk of feedback I kept getting, because I kind of did a bit of a prairie home companion tour around the country. Mm-hmm. I visited some friends and had meetings and dinners and breakfasts and all sorts of stuff.
Beautiful.
Relationships are really important to me. I hope they're really important to your listeners. Maintaining the ones that matter to you and that are, whether they're two-way or one-way streets, it's your determination of their value to you in the people you keep trusting, in the people you hold trust in, and who hold trust in you ideally. And the overwhelming consensus of my friends and peers was the one thing I couldn't take with me in exiting Stupid Cancer, which was the radio show, which they had to sunset because I was the host, and you can't replace me for the host. So everybody's like, get back behind a mic and scream as loud as you can, but make money this time. I was like, okay, I will figure that out.
Right.
So the original idea of this company was NPR for healthcare in the private sector, that there needed to be news media and journalism and targeted content that wasn't about hitting everyone, but hitting the right people and having purpose attached to it and humanity and empathy attached to it, because healthcare communications suck because they're run by lawyers and they're run by regulatory committees and commissions and the FDA, and everything is just so horrible that the nonprofits have it right if they can do it right, like Stupid Cancer does, like groups like the Leukemia Lymphoma. They have good messaging, they're trustworthy, but take all of that outside, all the commercials, all the ads that pop up. Like, why the hell are there bathtubs on a hill for a drug about rheumatoid arthritis? What does it have to do with anything? That doesn't speak to the 34-year-old woman who's trying to manage her motherhood with her kids with RA. Right. It doesn't speak empathy. These ads have become my bête noire. So this idea of creating better content for people that never wanted to have to listen to it. Right. Find a hope in a community in the way they would find the nonprofits, and then channel those listeners to better activities and support structures and financial assistance programs and co-pay assistance programs, where top of the funnel for consumer advocacy and patient advocacy is listenership. Old school media NPR for healthcare in the private sector. And that was the sapling idea behind this company.
Very interesting. And so how do those messages then for people tuning in, how do those messages get across now? So do you have a website? Obviously you're behind the mic, so I know you're a podcaster, but kind of how are you disseminating that information or getting that out?
Right. So there's 4 businesses within the company. The first one is the NPR model, or the Gimlet model.
Okay.
We are a network of multiple podcasters. We are creating new shows or acquiring existing podcasters who have a phenomenal audiences in very niche disease states. We currently have a show called FUMS, which stands for Fuck You Multiple Sclerosis, which is the number 2 multiple sclerosis podcast. We have a show called The Cycle on endometriosis, which is a young woman's sort of a preventative peer-to-peer support podcast, number 1 endo show in the country. We have a femtech leadership podcast called Hearts of Healthcare. We have a physician culture humor podcast called Is It Serious, which is like Kitchen Confidential meets Abbott and Costello for Dr. Culture and Gen Xers. Very unique, very funny. They make fun of pharma ads on every episode. And we're constantly building and acquiring, the top podcast in Parkinson's, the top podcast in Black cancer, the top podcast in cystic fibrosis. That's the network we are building, where together our voices are collectively louder, but we all share the equity of the audiences.
Right.
That's part 1. That's absolutely critical to build the pointillist painting, if you would, of multiple talented hosts, and incubate them, curate them, accelerate them so that their audiences grow, their messages grow, and there's a unified professional sound across the network. The second part of the company is we do large-scale social justice audio documentary series, like a Slow Burn or Serial, on public health efforts and public health disparities. We released a documentary last year called The Cancer Mavericks, which is a 50-year history of cancer advocacy that's never been told, as a history series, first and foremost, and then a human interest series, second. And then it's a policy series, third. Been listened to over 350,000 times. It's available wherever people can listen to podcasts. It's something you would expect from This American Life. We brought on a great team from Slate that did it for us. We're working on 4 documentaries now on the Cancer Mavericks of infertility rights, which is way more timely these days than it ever was. And a documentary on rural health access to care in smaller towns around America. The history of the pharmacist and what that stands for in terms of literal drugstore psychology and decision-making when it's difficult to get authentic conversations happening in small areas that have mom and pop pharmacists. And we're doing a documentary called Hippocrates Shrugged, which is on physician culture and suicide, skinned against the chokehold that insurance companies have on doctors. So that's the second part of the company.
Right.
The third part is we build podcasts for companies that want to do it right. So if there is a corporation that wants to build a podcast about mental health or empathy that's product-based, sure, we will do it in a way that doesn't make it look like it's a corporation making that show. And the fourth product is we launch shows for very specific niche patient audiences that may be 2,000 Americans.
Wow.
Where the goal of it is to specifically hit those people, and we do specifically hit those people, encourage them to join a community, sign up for a mailing list, and become part of this nonprofit ecosystem. And that's a very hyper niche, super one-off targeted strategy that no one's ever planned to put together before. When you're living in a rare disease or an orphan community and there's one nonprofit, how do you know they exist? And what do you need to learn? And how do you find your tribe? And what's the bigger tribe you need to be part of? So in a sense, yeah, we're kind of social justice. We're ending isolation, but we're doing it in a way that's through voice. People that sound like you, people that have been through what you're going through in a targeted way, not the pay and spray crap that's already out there that you hope people listen to. Very long answer to a very short question, but we developed this over 3.5 years to be this multifaceted, interdisciplinary, integrative agency.
I love it. I love the fact that you're connecting people. I think with any as a human being, I know there's 7 billion of us, roughly a little more on the face of the earth. But as a human being, I know that there's nothing that's more painful and detrimental to mental health than feeling isolated or alone when you're dealing with tough stuff, right? When the shit hits the fan, and you're trying to do it on your own. And so, for the listeners and the viewers, it doesn't matter what you have, if it's a health condition or any other condition, there's somebody on the planet that can give you some support and help and feedback because they've been through it too. And it sounds like that you're just really getting that niched, especially in healthcare, where it's so critical, right? Because when there's nothing worse, I had COVID. We went on vacation here a couple of weeks ago, and we came back, and of course we traveled through the airports, and we brought back that really fun illness called COVID. And so we passed that around at my house between my wife and I, and then the kids, and when you feel sick, you just don't feel like doing anything, right? And that was just COVID. Right. It was just annoyance. It was just a cold and a fever and tired but when you actually have, my mom, as I was sharing in pre-show, just went into remission from cancer, and she was ecstatic, right? Because it was consuming her life, right? I mean, it was consuming every waking moment was about, am I going to live another 5 or 10 years? If that, and the doctors are, kind of saying maybe, maybe not. And then for her to go on into, I won't call it spontaneous remission, but it was almost spontaneous remission. She called, she said, I don't even really have words for this. She said, I know I'm excited. I know I'm happy. I know I'm relieved. She said, I just don't ever remember being this happy. And I was like, right. Well, that's a good thing, Mom, and it is a good thing. And so I know how consuming it is, and for the most part, she had some sisters who had cancer, so she had people that she could go to and felt supported and felt connected with. But, I think there's a lot of people out there, to your point, especially in these micro niche disease states that probably don't know where to go and who do you talk to. And without community, it's so much harder, I think. I mean, is that what I'm sure at founding these two organizations, I'm sure you see that over and over, right?
Well, back in the day, we called it psychosocial. Now it's mental health. So psychosocial was the academic way of saying, you're going to hate yourself and you're going to be angry and pissed off, and how do you improve whatever you can? And psychosocial well-being was one of the first data points analyzed by the researchers going back to cancer survivorship. Mm-hmm. Which is the more isolated you feel, the poorer your outcomes.
Right.
Sounds obvious and logical, like a nice flow chart today, but we didn't even have the data to support that. It was all assumptions.
Right.
And one of the nice things we came up with, not everyone wants to talk to somebody right away. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be, but knowing they're there improves quality of life without engaging with them in the first place. Another great data point was just knowing you're not alone without necessarily taking advantage of not being alone is just as valuable as taking advantage of those communities. So the whole, when you're ready to engage, here are the people, engaging people in moments of crisis. You're in crisis. The last thing you want is to search for someone like you immediately. Some people may want that, but most people just they have to process
it. Yeah, sure. Right.
And then, by the way, here's a crowd of people that totally will hold your hand and walk you through it like handrails when you're ready to engage them. That's the challenge of all healthcare communications. Is they're targeting people in crisis. I'm not talking like your eyelids are too short or you got bumps. This isn't like
this is life or death stuff. Yeah.
I mean, there are some serious chronic diseases, and we're not going to take that away from anybody, but crisis stuff, real crisis stuff, and or life conditions, you just like psoriasis is terrible. What people have to go through with that. MS is terrible if not treated correctly. Endo has no treatments whatsoever. It's not a scale of which one is worse or scarier, but you can be in crisis in any form that you happen to have. The last thing you want is to watch a dog on a sled in the winter for a drug that you should be on.
Right.
So this notion of empathy and community and trust through like radio just doesn't exist. And that's the idea of ending isolation by hearing someone that sounds like you instead of a poster someone thinks is someone that looks like you.
Right.
It's a better way, like to help even the nonprofits, to help them find the people with a level of trust and empathy to make them aware that when you're ready,
we're here.
We got you.
Right. That connection and that authenticity, right? I mean, and I think, I think we're seeing that so much more post this weirdness that we've been through over the last 2.5, 3 years people are, and I'll count myself in there, people are sick of kind of trying to, being sold something or the BS or the gloss or the, right? It's like, no, actually tell me what it actually is and what it actually does. And right. I mean, I want to actually know, versus you see that, and it's creating a hell of a lot of divisiveness also, post everything we've been through. But I personally think that's a good thing because it allows everybody to start to, get real with where they're at and what they believe. It's hard to know what you believe until you see somebody that believes the opposite up in your face, and then all of a sudden you start to understand what you actually believe. There's a catalyst.
I always go back to what was it, the third Indiana Jones, where he chose poorly and he melts. Right?
I don't remember that.
It was the one with Sean Connery, the third one. Where they're like looking after the cup of Christ, and the guy picks the wrong cup and he melts.
Yeah. Right.
Like, you want to observe the people that maybe chose poorly
right.
to know that you've kind of chosen the right thing.
Chose wisely. So I'm always curious because I have, just like you, I have fascinating guests on this show, and I'm always interested in what the underlying motivation is. So you have built a not-for-profit and a for-profit that are all about communication, all about support, all about compassion, all about empathy, all about connection. Why on earth did you do that?
Because I'm pissed.
Okay.
Eternally.
Okay.
I think being upset that things should be better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean like changing the world and peace on earth. Like, that's esoterically existential.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things that are so simple to fix. And I literally mean really simple to fix, that just boggle my mind that there's such disingenuity and apathy and sloth and complacency that no one even wants to try to fix them. I'll give you one great example of a huge success story. So for years, mammograms were 50 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be 50 to get a reimbursable mammogram.
Gotcha.
Great. That's fantastic. Breast cancer happens over 50. We started to see in the 2000s that breast cancer was happening more in 40-somethings.
Mm-hmm.
And it was worse in 40-somethings. So for years, Stupid Cancer, our partners, Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, led this massive push to get screenings down to 40 and reimbursed by employers or just by whatever it is. It's reimbursed. Go whatever you want. And finally, once the Affordable Care Act passed, we were able to slot in this sub bill called the Early Act into ACA. And it mandated coverage for women getting mammograms at 40. And it also mandated that the companies making the mammography machines had to update their tech for women's breast tissues that were 40 years old, which are usually denser than women that are menopausal. And they did all that. And as a result, women are getting their first mammograms at 40, and the ones who are finding cancer, and there are many of them, a couple hundred a year, would have died if we didn't get that bill passed. But the idea of having to spend 8 years to get mammogram screenings down to 40 from 50, which just seems so obvious.
Yeah, right.
You know, one of my best friends had her mammogram on her 40th birthday. It's stage 2 breast cancer. She's alive today because we got that bill passed in 2012. That's what it shouldn't be this ridiculously stupid.
Right.
To do a small thing like that.
Right.
You know, this isn't climate change and saving. It's the smallest things. So that's what drives me, because I know it's possible to plug small holes in the dam. It shouldn't be a slow burn.
Right.
But that's what keeps driving me to fix little things.
Well, and when you say fix little things, from my perspective, where I sit today, you're fixing things that are not so little, actually, that are the most important, which is the human, emotional psyche, if you want to call it that, or the mental health, or whatever name you want to put on it. But that's actually a really big deal. I mean, because that is what, that's what truly changes, is when the collective starts to shift consciousness. That's when things happen, right? And you were able to drive it. You will. That's what you ultimately did to get bills introduced and get things done, is you're changing the way people think about things. And then they go, oh, yeah, let's wait. It took 8 years.
Well, again, the young adult cancer movement, which was like Live Strong
Right.
in the early days, again, a group called Critical Mass, the National Coalition for Cancer. There's a litany. If you visit OffScrip.com, you see all the nonprofits we work with. And it's incredible relationships, going back to what we talked about before, of just nonprofits and policy groups that are all trying to do the right thing, and they just need the vitamin B shots to get them done. Can I say one? I'll give you one more
hill
I'm dying on.
Yes. Please die on another hill. This is
it's another hill I'm dying on. So esophageal cancer is a death. There's no stage 1 is better at esophageal. You get it, you're dead. You cut your whole head open. It's terrible. But esophageal cancer is resultant of GERD. So if you have GERD and you're on all these like CVS pharmacy over-the-counter crap, you could develop bad GERD, which is also as a jargony name called Barrett's esophagus. But bad GERD predisposes the cells in your esophagus to cancer.
Okay.
This is known data. This is not new. There's actually a test that a gastroenterologist can give you during an endoscopy to see how bad your GERD is. And if your GERD is that bad, they put you on different medications so you never, ever, ever get esophageal cancer. The idea that could be a test to eliminate entirely a single cancer, like HPV and cervical cancer, that's astonishing.
Right.
Why isn't this thing being taken more seriously? Where is the cholesterol in that artery preventing every human in this country? 50 million Americans have GERD. They're not all bad GERD.
Oh, gotcha. Yep.
Why can't that be a thing?
Right.
Where primary care asks, are you taking Zantac? Why? Because I eat Chipotle. Okay. Well, I'm not going to tell you to stop eating Chipotle, but here's a test to not get esophageal cancer.
Right.
What a great idea.
Right.
That's a hill to die on.
Yeah. And why do you think, since we're on that hill, why do you think that information like that, is it just the existing way that, I mean, why isn't that more, like I've never heard of that before. So why isn't it easier, or why isn't it, what is the problem with the communication or the dissemination of that information? I mean, is it just the system itself? Do drug companies not get paid to do it? I mean, what's stopping that flow?
Well, the drug companies are actively vying for this to become a diagnosed reimbursable therapy because they'll make tons of money on it.
Right.
Which is perfectly fine. I'm all in favor of drugs that actually help people getting FDA approved and put in front. They have a huge lobby spending all this money to get these drugs approved. The challenge is always in the data and the research and the lawyers. And then, of course, even if it's there, it's still the communication down to the doctors and to the people. You know, there's no like, don't get esophagealcancer.com.
Right.
There's no like public health campaign saying, ask your doctor if Zantac is going to kill you. Right. Can't get away with that.
Right.
It's not going to work.
Right.
But this is what I'm saying about like the wrapped apathy in communications down to patients and doctors. It's all just so sanitized and stoic. There's no emotion because there can't be legally, because God forbid you say the wrong thing and some research gets and some lawyer. The cholesterol is in, yes, the system, but consumers have an avenue to actually help other consumers know about these situations and then get those consumers to vote their way to these things getting passed and approved.
Very interesting.
Outside the system.
Right. Yes. Because, I mean, being around healthcare for the last basically 20 years, there are so many things, so many hills, as you put it. There are so many
you're nodding
hills.
your head every time I say something.
Yes, right, yeah. There are so many hills because I see it. I mean, some of the stuff that we have to do in the healthcare system, it's like, you know what? It would be really cool if we could just take care of the patients and not have to spend all this time, money, resources just to get paid what the government's already agreed that we should get paid, but we still have to spend, I mean, so much administration on just collecting it and documenting it and doing all this stuff. And I'm just like, wouldn't the healthcare system be better off if we actually just got to take those same resources and apply them to the actual patient, right? But that's not the way the game's set up. The game is set up that for you to get paid in healthcare, you have to jump through all this stuff 3 or 4 times and justify. And it's like, yeah, I get that there's bad actors, but the huge bell curve in healthcare actually wants to help people and wants to take care of people and wants to see people get healthy. And yes, but in any industry, there's going to be the 5, 10, whatever % that are frauds, that are crooks and criminals and all that. And so spend your time chasing them. That's fine. But spend your resources going after the ones that are the bad actors instead of making every time something happens in healthcare, everybody then has to have a new policy. And it's like, well, we actually take really good care of the people we have. I don't think we have to do one more thing to do that. So yeah, I appreciate the things that you're doing because I truly see it from the inside, and it's hopefully more and more it's happening, to your point, outside. We've had to come up with some systems, and we've come up with some things that are just about patient health and patient care that we don't get paid for, we don't get reimbursed for. It's just the right thing to do, right? It's the right thing to do when you're taking care of people. So I really appreciate what you're doing. So the best way for people to find out about this, though, it sounds like, is to go to OffScrip, and it's without the T, right? OffScrip, SCIP.
SCRIP, yeah. I try to make everything difficult.
Oh, sorry, R. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, people can, if you want to learn more about me, MatthewZachary.com is my homepage. Nothing fancy there. My show is called Out of Patience, because we all are. And it's wherever you listen to podcasts, just Out of Patience. Or actually, I'm the only Matthew Zachary with a podcast. So just
that's handy.
That's quite handy to be the only Matthew Zachary with a podcast. So just type my name wherever you listen to podcasts. I'll pop up.
Right.
And that's how you hear about all my ranting and raving with great guests.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, certainly we'd love to have you come back on. I'd like to hear more just about the business model and how that works as well. I'm always fascinated by creative business models and how they work and how they grow and how you market those. That's always really cool. I know you're part of our Global Happiness Summit, so I'm looking forward to visiting with you more on that. And then if we can ever be a resource for anything you're doing, especially when you're talking about some of these advocacy things, please let us know so we can inform our listeners. And even if it doesn't necessarily directly affect them, it probably affects somebody they know. It's like if you don't, even if you don't have cancer, guess what? You know people who have had cancer or will get cancer. If it's not you, it's somebody in your family, it's one of your friends or something, right? We've all been affected by cancer. So, just having these resources and passing them along is super important. And not just for cancer. In your case, there's many diseases that you guys address and provide more information for. So love what you're doing and thank you for doing it.
Matt, I appreciate it. We probably have much in the Black Ops territory to talk about and collude on.
Yes, I would agree. I would totally agree. So thank you so much for coming on, and let's have you on again in the future.
Will do. Done. It's a date.
Thank you. Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to BriteVibe.com. That's BriteVibe.com. Thank you for listening.